Good afternoon, everyone. I spoke to my father this morning because it was his birthday, and he said, please welcome everybody and give them a big Sal Mubarak from him. He's resting in Florence. He's not retired. He's just resting in between gigs. He's got more gigs coming up. He just was in Mumbai just a few months ago at the NCPA, and he's in Florence, in Berlin, in Milan, at La Scala all the time. So he does want to thank everyone for the support he's gotten from this Zoroastrian community. And I want to say I'm so inspired, Zerbanu and Mahabanu, for your talk, because what I do in my life in music is very similar to what you do. You've done it on a much grander scale than I, but it's all about empathy. It's all about leading the path forward. So I'm delighted to say a few words to this group. And you know, there's a lot of business leaders in the room, and I was wondering why they wanted me to talk, because I'm not a business leader. I do music. I run a $10 million organization, which is part of a $60 million conservatory, but I'm not a businessman. What I do consider myself to be is an aggregator of people. And I use creative artists as a means to aggregate those people. So let me tell you just a brief little bit about my background. That started my career really when I was in high school. I used to bring music that I liked on reel-to-reel tapes to parties in people's basements. And then I would suggest, and some would say, force them to listen to what I wanted them to listen to. So I was part influencer, part salesman, and it required ingredients that still apply to my work today, 50 years later. A, some knowledge, B, some taste, whatever that is, however one measures that, some ego, chutzpah, if you will, to think that what I like could or would be of interest to others, and then some persuasiveness, or to use a different word, marketing. It also required people, and friends in those days, high school friends in those days, and ticket buyers now, to get on this journey, who saw the value of the product, and more precisely, who believed in the value proposition of what I was espousing. Not just music, but rather curating an experience for people. And think back of the concerts and plays and operas and exhibitions that you've seen in your life, and I guarantee you it's not that note or that phrase or that song that you heard. It was the experience of you in the room with other people watching something together. I went from providing music for free at parties to being the guy that collected everyone's $10 when a new concert was going to go on sale the next day. And remember when tickets for concerts were $10? That's how long ago that was. And I would go down to the box office at the Montreal Forum. I grew up in Montreal. And those were in the days where to get a concert ticket, you had to go to the box office, to the one box office. There was no Ticketmaster, there was no internet, no StubHub, and it required some actual effort. So I would collect all the $10 from all my friends, and I'd go and buy 20, 30, 40 tickets to the Elton John concert, or whatever it was. But my fatal flaw was I did that work. I got up at 4 in the morning, went down, stood in line, got all the tickets, delivered all the tickets, and I didn't charge a markup. And I realized about 40 years later that was the beginning of my not-for-profit life. So 50 years later now, 35 in concerts and 15 on stage as an actor before that, I have come to know one kind of singular truth, which is not anything revelatory. And that is that we as a species need to gather together. Look at this room. It's a primal need. It's not something new. Greeks knew that, Romans knew that, Zoroastrians know that. Studies show that experiencing music or art or sports or religion as a group is a vastly different experience than sitting alone in your room, in your pajamas, watching something on a screen. And part of that is the validation of those around you. And we also know that when groups get together and are engaged together with their whole selves, and by that I mean with their mind, with their body, and with their soul, human connections happen. Pheromones are released. Joy and sometimes sadness abound. Heart rates actually synchronize with groups of people that are experiencing some art or some music together. In short, it creates community. Now, Post-pandemic, people have become a lot more selective in what they want to go see and what they choose to attend and what they want to pay for. There are lots more options, and you do have the option to stay home and watch something on the screen, but it's far less appealing. Because why? Because of that primal need to gather and experience as a group. Audiences have come back, thankfully. If not, I wouldn't have a job. The commercial entertainment business and sports have come back much quicker than the arts. Look at what happened in Toronto last fall with Taylor Swift. 6 concerts of 50,000 people each. Look at the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup finals that are going on right now. But the arts have rebounded as well. And why is that? The reason is that we offer not just concerts or plays, but we offer experiences. We offer shared experiences, and those that are steeped in excellence and the highest artistic expression. Quite different from the commercial music scene or sports, where fantastic experiences, yes, they are fantastic, are designed to fill the stadiums and venues and garner the highest ticket price. Anyone have a ticket for the Leafs game tonight? No. Because it's about $500 to go see hockey players. It's the same game they played 3 months ago for $20, $30, $40, but now it's the playoffs, so it's $500. And you can't guarantee a win. You can't guarantee a good game. When people come to my venue, I can guarantee them a great concert. So there is a difference. So I run now a concert hall, which is small. It's only 1,100 seats. But it's attached to Canada's largest conservatory, arts conservatory. We host about 250 concerts a year, and we have 10,000 music teachers teaching 200,000 students across Canada, in every city from coast to coast to coast. And we operate with a much different set of values than our commercial concert promoters. In our world, arts organizations have a responsibility to create conditions within which artists can boldly reflect on the times in which they live and can create it in ways that speak to them. It's then my job, or anyone who runs an arts organization, to ensure that we do so, that they can do so while still keeping the lights on and keeping the employees paid. On the education side, we have 2 relatively small professional schools, about 200 students, that are going to go on to become players in orchestras and jazz bands, etc. They're going to stay in music. But the vast majority of those 200,000 students will flourish in other fields, whether it's business or medicine or law or engineering or teaching. Russell Granite, a friend of mine who runs the New York Times, the education programs for New York Times Square, has said, and I quote, "I have no interest in creating artists. If these kids want to go on to become actors and dancers and painters and musicians, great. But the programs I care deeply about aren't about that. For the critical mass, it's about giving young people the skills to just imagine a different life, a different way of thinking, a level of empathy for others. It is what makes civilization civil. It's not about creating artists, it's about creating people who think like artists." A good lesson for all business people in the room. We get contacted by business leaders all the time saying, "I'm tired of these people coming out with their MBAs. They know nothing." What we want to get is creative people who have studied music or studied art, and they can bring that creative thinking to the business forums. But yet the arts remain an afterthought in most schools, and the arts are likely to be the first to be cut when budget cuts rear their heads. And why? And I think about this all the time. My simple answer is measurability, and specifically measurability in the short term. Many arts organizations measure success by how many tickets they sell or how many donations they receive. And that seems very intuitive to board members and funders who think about the arts as transactionally. In fact, what the best arts organizations do is measure other outcomes, such as youth development, community safety, education, neighborhood vitality, and a sense of place and a sense of identity. Those returns are much harder to measure, and they force us to take a much longer look at data. But it does exist. In a recent US study, it was reported that at-risk youth that had arts programs available to them were 23% more likely to attend college than their peers without arts programs. 67% of music therapy participants with dementia feel less anxious or have reduced their dependency on medications due to arts programs. Cultural districts have less poverty, improved child welfare, lower morbidity, and 45% of medical institutions offer some kind of arts programs because it benefits patient recovery. All of these are counterintuitive to the you should run your arts organization like a business crowd. I have those people on my board. They may know how to run a for-profit business, but they do not understand how to run a mission-driven not-for-profit. They understand shareholder value, but they do not understand the value proposition in the arts, which is building better citizens, which is teaching empathy, which is, as Shakespeare said, holding up, as it were, a mirror up to nature. Anna Serrano, a friend who's the president and vice chancellor of OCAD University here in Toronto, recently wrote in the Toronto Star, Canada needs a shared vision for the future, and we need to start building it now. Building this new shared vision for Canada means treating sovereignty not only as a geopolitical idea, but as a cultural and economic one. This shift in mindset is essential and overdue. Live music, live arts, culture must be seen as integral to the shared vision supported by deliberate and progressive policy. And she continues, let's stop seeing creativity as soft power and start recognizing it as nation building. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce says that the culture sector is a significant economic driver and cornerstone of our identity. We all know the terms elbows up. Since the last 6 weeks, maybe, it got coined, but that's who we are. We saw the election last night. That's what they ran on, Canadian identity, and Canadian identity told by our creative people and our business leaders working side by side. I just recently came back from Ottawa for the Canadian Arts Summit, which included 250 not-for-profit leaders arts leaders from across the country. And after 3 days of discussing the election and how to increase funding, et cetera, and the threat from our south, we ended up with a communique which we were going to send to whichever government got elected. It got sent today to Mr. Carney, and we hope he will listen. And here's just a brief excerpt. The story of our nation is told by our artists and creators. If there is one industry that knows how to help in this critical moment, it is Canada's arts and culture sector. And as the nation's storytellers, we are uniquely positioned to strengthen and shape our national story. Canadian arts are not simply entertainment, they are vital to our collective identity. Arts and culture contribute $60 billion to Canada's GDP every year and employs 850,000 people. That is bigger than agriculture, that is bigger than fisheries, that is bigger than forestry. In fact, it is bigger than all three of them combined. Combined, those three industries are a collective $42 billion. Arts are $60 billion. Just in the live music sector, there are 100,000 people who work in the Canadian live music sector, and we attract 20 million visitors who attend live music concerts. We also know that cultural tourists spend 3 times as much as business tourists and business conference goers when they visit Canada. So the financial stats are there, the community and nation building results are clear, the healthcare benefits are proven, the social cohesion and citizen building outcomes are obvious, and yet arts and culture are the first things to go. And back to my earlier point, why? Measurability. I'm convinced it is because our thinking is too short term. We want quick results. We want quarterly ROI reports. We want government leaders. We have government leaders who want to hold up posters with 3-word slogans like axe the tax, etc., or fund expensive buildings with their wealthy friends' names attached. But we need to start looking at the long-term needs of our citizens and provide them with means to become more engaged citizens, to think creatively, to solve problems, to learn how to work in teams, to learn new languages, new rhythms, to create a Canadian culture that is larger than some of its multicultural parts. I think I should go to Asha and get some direction. But it may take 15 years to see a child go from taking a violin lesson to becoming what I'm talking about. It might take an arts institution 30 years. Government doesn't want to wait 30 years. Business leaders don't want to wait 30 years. They want it to happen right now. And that's not how the arts works. That's not how culture works. That's not how building society works. So with hard work and with willing partners, I'm sure we will get there, but only if we can get beyond the incessant drive of quarterly reports and results and go deeper to what matters in our souls. And with that, I thank you, shukran, merci, and I'll invite Cyrus and Cheyenne, and we'll have a little conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mervon. That was awesome. Very nice. We're just going to ask him a couple of questions and just a little bit about some of his past and some of the things he's done. So let me start by saying you worked in New York, and from what I understand, you used to be a singer waiter, something like that.
I don't readily admit to that, yes, but when I was in theater school and I needed to have a job to pay for my rent, and a friend of mine was a waiter at a dessert nightclub. They only served coffee, tea, and dessert, but all the waiters got up and sang, for the people that were sitting there. We had one piano player, and so I went and auditioned, and I got a job, and I spent 2 years slinging cannolis, as we used to say, and serving coffee and singing Broadway hits or whatever else we could sing. And quite a few people came out of that became fairly big stars, but I did not. I switched to arts management a few years later.
Well, you've done well. You've done it. Go ahead, Cheyenne.
Yeah. Tell us about a performance or artist that surprised you.
Well, I think what I try to do is set the stage. First of all, I invite artists that I like and that I think have something to say, but then I try and set the stage so that they can surprise and delight and move people every day. It doesn't happen every night. Magic doesn't happen every night, but I think our job as arts, venue operators and curators is to give them that opportunity so that they can soar. But we've had so many concerts that have done that. Just recently, we had a concert in February that was supposed to be two pianists, Yu Jia Wang, the young Chinese American, and Vikingur Olofsson, who's Icelandic pianist. They were going to play two piano, four-hand concert, completely sold out, very high ticket price, and she canceled that morning. And Vikingur had already flown from Iceland. So I said, what are we going to do? Can you play a solo concert, or should we just scrap the whole thing? And he said, well, I spent last year on the road doing the Goldberg variations. I haven't touched it in 6 months, but I think I can go in a room and practice for a couple of hours and play it again tonight. So the audience came in, packed, completely disappointed that Yuja had canceled. But I said, with good news and bad news, she's canceled, but he's going to play anyway. And the whole energy of the room was kind of on edge, partly because they were pissed off, partly because they paid the babysitter, they were here, they paid the parking, and might as well enjoy it. And he gave one of the most extraordinary performances I've ever heard in my life. 75, 85 minutes straight through of just solo piano playing Bach. And as he said to the people at the beginning, we're sorry that Yuja is not here, but one should never apologize for Bach. And he played, and it was spectacular.
Wow, that's very interesting. Tell me something, Mervon. What's a part of your job that most people don't realize?
I think people think that I get to work at 7:45 for the 8 o'clock show, and then I go home at 10. But I get there at 10 in the morning, and I do budgets, and I do HR work, and I do marketing, and I do fundraising, and have a big team that I manage. And then the bonus of all that is you work from 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning till 7:30 at night, doing all the stuff that is not really that interesting, and then you get to sit in the concert for 2 hours as kind of the bonus. That I would do for free. The other stuff I charge for. The actual going to the concerts and relating to the artists, and I introduce all the artists every night, and I usually take them to dinner afterwards. That's the fun part. The other stuff is what is driving me towards retirement.
Okay, Cheyenne?
And what does a great performance mean to you?
I think a great performance is something that is unexpected, that touches your soul, and it doesn't matter the genre. It doesn't have to be Western classical music. It doesn't have to be Indian classical music. It doesn't have to be jazz. It can be anything, but it has to touch your soul. If the artist on stage has really nothing to say and is just going through the motions, I'm not interested. It doesn't matter if they're playing scales. I once sat in a rehearsal with the great classical pianist Andras Schiff, and he was just practicing, warming up for that evening's concert. And most pianists would play a phrase and they'd go, play it again, and it didn't work, and they'd play it again, and they'd get kind of increasingly angry with themselves until they got it right. And the way he practiced, he would do something and he'd miss a note, and he'd just go back and he'd just do it again, and then maybe he'd miss a note and he'd just go back and do it again. And it was all seamless. And every minute of that practicing, which really was just scales and arpeggios, became music. And became really moving music because his heart and his body and his mind were all connected to his fingers. And every ounce of his being is about making art. So if artists can do that, and it's not easy, if artists can do that night after night after night on the road, that's a gift that I certainly don't have. That's why I'm on the other side of the business. It's a joy to be sitting in a theater when someone is going through that, and they'll tell you also that the audience has such a big influence on that particular night. It's not the night before where they might have played in Buffalo, and then the night after where they play in Montreal. It's that night. It doesn't happen again. It never happens the same way twice. Which is why, my son will kill me, but he thinks that my job is going to be obsolete because everything's going to be AI. But if that happens, then it's the same thing every night. What we have with human artists of great talent is the ability for them to really kind of, strive for the heavens. It sounds cliche, but when that happens, you feel it. The whole audience breathes together. The whole audience goes on a journey, and those are the magical moments.
I can relate to that because I was at your father's last concert here in Toronto. And
many years ago.
17, October 2017.
Yeah.
And it was mesmerizing. It was something on the bucket list, and I had that feeling that evening. It was amazing. It was amazing.
I'll tell you one other, probably the thing I'm most proud of at the Conservatory in Kerner Hall. We got a grant like many other people did in 2017 during our 150th sesquicentennial, and we were deciding, what should we apply for culturally to celebrate this anniversary in Canada? Should we send our orchestra on tour? Should we commission a big opera? And I had an idea that we should put together musicians from all over the world that live in Toronto, that have moved here from whatever circumstances, refugees, business opportunities, parents dragged them, whatever it was, but they're living in Toronto, and they're great musicians, but they're not getting an opportunity to play in major halls. So we put out a notice, we auditioned 150 people from every corner of the world, including Syrians who had, just landed a week or two before with no clothing, but they happened to play the violin, or they happened to play a frame drum of some kind. We eventually ended up with 12 musicians from 12 different countries. There was a Pakistani, there was a Tibetan, there was a Chinese flute player, Greek oud player, African percussionist from Burkina Faso, a Brazilian singer, a Peruvian drummer, a Cuban sax player, a Mexican bassist, and then we saved one spot for an indigenous Canadian fiddle player. So there were 12 of them, and we got to the first rehearsal, and I said, okay, now we have to make some music. And they all looked at each other and looked at me like, you're crazy. How are we going to play together? We don't have any of the same traditions. We don't know any of the same tunes. So we started from scratch, and we just started very slowly. Everyone brought in a little bit of music, and then we figured out how to make it. My original idea was the African guy would bring in a song, and we'd play an African song. And then the Pakistani would bring in a song, we'd play a Pakistani song. But that didn't work because the African guy could play his music, but the rest of the people couldn't play African music. And we've quickly realized that no, we're in Canada. What we have to do is not make a soup, we have to make a mosaic. And we have to have ingredients from all the 12 traditions in every single song. So it might start like an African song or start like an Iranian song, but then another influence would come in and take over and push it this way. So it required musicians who were not only good in their craft from where they came from, but also able to be malleable and to change what they had learned so that they could allow the other influence in. And that created some tension and some conflict. You know, I remember the Pakistani guy said, "No, it has to be like this. This is the rhythm." And blah, blah. And he said, "No, you know, that might have been the rhythm, you know, in Baluchistan where you came from, but it's not the rhythm for this band. You have to add that African element to it." That was in 2017. It was supposed to be a one-night stand for the sesquicentennial, and it's 2025. They're about to do their third album. They're traveling all over the country. It's called Kune, by the way, if anyone wants to go see them. And they come to Kerner Hall every couple of years. And
Good, interesting.
thank God to the Canada Council. They gave me $100,000 to start it, and now it just continues.
Wow, that's very good. Thank you very much. Thank you really very much for your time. We're really happy to have you here, and you're welcome to spend the rest of the afternoon here with us if you can.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
I have one pertinent question, especially for Mervon. My name is Vicky Nada. I come from India.
Are you my cousin?
Certainly, yes.
That's the question.
Right, okay. My question is that music is an expression of the soul. It comes from the domain of non-linear space-time continuum. And yet we see all musicians trying to read notes and remember what they have to play. I mean, it doesn't gel well in my understanding that when music has to be free-flowing, why should somebody read it, not to forget?
Well, you're describing Western music versus Indian music versus jazz.
Any music, any universal music, an artist plays to the memory of the soul, connected with the universal energy, and not connected with the ambience there.
Yeah.
And the artist is well enough endowed and bestowed upon with all the magic of expression of music, of the notes, the melody, the harmony, the symphony. Why yet they have to read the notes?
I think it comes down to tradition and training, because you know, when you're talking about Raviji Shankar, Zakir Hussain, it's 30 years of training, of learning those scales and learning the rag, and then it's free. Especially Western classical musicians, are taught in a way that the score is the Bible, and you don't alter the Bible. Now, within that score, you can bring your own humanity, absolutely. And if you don't, you're not a real artist. But it's very prescribed. It's a constant struggle between the Western musical tradition and the Eastern musical tradition. And in the middle, we have jazz, which is kind of a hybrid of both. And a lot of global musicians who are very good improvisers. You know, Tuareg musicians from Mali, indigenous musicians from Peru, who are completely unlearned from an education standpoint, but their soul is filled with whatever they're playing. So it's back and forth. But well, you should do a PhD thesis on the difference of how that works, because either side is very difficult. I'll just tell this one thing. When Ravi Shankar and my dad did a sitar concerto, they premiered with the New York Philharmonic, and I was 15 or 16, and I was in their house, my dad's house in New York, and Raviji came over, and they had all these pieces of music. They sat on the floor, and pieces of music all over the living room, with a Western guy to notate, and Ravi said, no, it has to be, and then the guy would write it down, and then because the Western musicians were not going to be able to follow what Raviji said. He didn't want to write it down. He thought they should just listen and react, but they couldn't do it, so they had to write it down. But they did leave space for some improvisation within the concert. Same thing Armaiti mentioned when Zain Dalal came with Zakirji. Our student orchestra, all 18, 19, 20 years old, had to learn how to listen to Zakir's improvisations and know when to come in. And that's why we brought Zain, because he knew both the classical Western notation and Zakir's improvisation, and he could kind of be the traffic cop and get them to meld together. It's not easy.
So one is soulful and the other is mindful, probably.
Well, they're both soulful and both mindful. It's a different side of the brain, I guess, that you use. Hopefully they're both at both times.
All right.
What you were saying about the measurability of arts being a hindrance when it comes to getting public funding, I thought was quite interesting. As someone with a business background, that's one of the reasons why, like you rightfully said, people tend to avoid funding it in times of crisis. This is a big question. I don't expect you to have every answer, but I'm just like, do you have any ideas of how you could make the impact of art and music more measurable in a way that would be like observed by businesses?
It is a big question. I think the easiest answer to that is they have to actually show up and see it. So many funders, they look at the proposal, they go through their budget and say, okay, we can give you this much or that much, or whatever. But then they write the check and they don't come. I remember when we had funders come to see a class that we did with Indigenous kids. And they gave us some money. It's Indigenous kids. It's a good cause, and you could see them rolling their eyes a little bit. But once they came into the classroom, and it was a math class, and it was a math class using dance. And what the teacher did, who's a music teacher, said, "I'm going to teach them about obtuse angles and I don't remember the other ones, all the triangles and all the geometric terms, but they're going to do it using their bodies. So they're going to sit like this, or they're going to sit with one arm up and one leg down and make angles and learn the names of the angles by using their bodies. And that way, the kids never forgot it. They never forgot what an obtuse angle was because they could just go to what they did with their body and said, that's what that was. And the funder saw that and said, his mind was blown. I said, it's such a simple concept, but you've actually never seen it before. Now that you've seen it, maybe you'll continue the funding. But I think a lot of funders don't actually show up. They do what they are supposed to do or what they need to do because they're told to, I don't know. But if they see the impact, but as I said, it's a long impact. You can't say, I'm going to give you money for 6 kids to go through a program and 6 weeks later, let me see the results. It takes much longer than that, especially with children. It may take 20, 30 years. But I guarantee you if it's well taught, what they learned in those 6 weeks will follow them for the rest of their lives.
I want to just add to that, and I know it sounds crazy, but when I taught grade 1 in an inner city school, our class came to Kerner Hall to perform, and I don't think I've ever told you that. And we trained with musicians who came into our school. These are kids where sometimes, they couldn't make it to school on time, or you knew they didn't have breakfast that morning. And as their classroom teacher, it was my goal to take them out on a trip every month somewhere they'd never been before. And we took them to Roy Thompson Hall. They performed at Kerner Hall. And I had a mom tell me once, thank you for doing this, because I have never been here before. And I can't imagine now what that impact would have been to the grade 1 children in that class who had professional musicians come into our classroom, teach us the songs, and then come together with other classroom children, do the dress rehearsal, and perform in Kerner Hall at the Royal Conservatory. So it's outreach programs like that we don't even see and we don't even realize that make an impact on our community.
I'll tell you we started a program 2 years ago called the Oscar Peterson Program. Oscar Peterson was one of our graduates, and our junior level school is called the Oscar Peterson School, but we started the Oscar Peterson Program for inner city kids that couldn't afford to have a lesson, couldn't afford for an instrument. And we had a girl, 14, 15 years old, come in and she said she was a pianist. And they said, what kind of a piano do you play on? Do you have a piano at home? And she said, no. She had a piece of paper with piano notes, and she would finger the piece of paper. When she came to our audition, she played a piano for the first time in her life as her audition.
Oh.
And she was brilliant, actually. And she's now been in the program for 2 years. And she's probably going to go on to do something, I don't know what, but something within arts, culture, humanities, because she had such a strong desire that she printed out a keyboard on a piece of paper and learned how to play the notes that way. So those things stay with you.
Well, Mervon, we'd like to thank you so much for your time. And I think what's really apparent today is that we'd love to have every single panel and single speaker spend the whole day with us. We thank you so much for coming, and we hope that you join us again at another event. Thank you.
My pleasure.